So, Jeff, when do you want to start? Are you guys ready to go? You ready to go? Okay. Hey, thanks for being part of this hastily put together press conference. So much of today was spent in contact with a number of communities on the west coast of Alaska, as we know, and I want to thank the Weather Service because they gave us a pretty good heads up that the remnants of this typhoon were heading our way. And it has impacted, it continues to impact the western coast of Alaska. Everywhere from the lower Kuskokwim area all the way up to Kotzebue and possibly points further north. So that area north of Nome is beginning to feel the impacts of this, lack of a better expression, tropical storm, remnants of a typhoon. Again, we've been in contact with communities up and down the coast. We've been in contact with leadership up and down the coast, from cities to boroughs to our native corporations, members of our federal delegation we've also had a conversation with as well. Just preliminarily, we're trying to assess exactly what has occurred. Again, this is almost 1,000 miles worth of storm front. And we've got a lot of rain, we've got wind, and we've got surge. Storm surge is going to be the big concern. It certainly is impacting many of our communities in the western coast of Alaska. We've had flooding, ocean flooding. We've had impacts on roads and potentially seawalls. We've had impacts with regard to fuel storage, oil storage. We are assessing to what degree our water and sewer systems in our communities have been impacted, and we're also looking at the potential of maybe some airports and ports that are impacted. So this is a large weather system, obviously. It's a large front. We have no indication as of this moment that there has been loss of life directly attributed to the storm. We have no word yet as of this moment that there has been injuries, even minor, but I wouldn't be surprised if that also occurs given the nature of the storm and people trying to secure their belongings and their personal property. And so really what is happening right now is folks in those communities are taking care of each other. They are making sure that people are safe as possible. There are, in many communities, places where folks can go that believe that their homes are in jeopardy or have been damaged within the communities. We are fortunate that we have the Red Cross here in the state that are also monitoring the situation. We've had elements of FEMA up here in the state before this even happened that are going to be staying here and working with us to assess the situation. And so right now we're in assessment mode for those that are still experiencing the storm. They are once again keeping their families, friends, and neighbors safe. The communities have stood up in many instances their emergency response teams. So again, right now we just know that this has impacted the western coast of Alaska. The severity, we're going to assess that and ascertain what and where and exactly what's occurred. We have declared a disaster with regard to the state for this tropical storm or remnants of this tropical storm. We're also in contact, as mentioned, with our federal elements of the federal government. And depending upon the size and scope and damage, we would anticipate that we'll be having a discussion with the federal government, too, on declaring a disaster for this storm. Again, this is a storm along about 1,000-mile front in western Alaska. So in essence, if you think about it, it's would be something akin to parts of Florida being impacted, Georgia, South Carolina, and maybe even further points further north. We did get word that there is another typhoon impacting Japan as we speak, and that's if the remnants of that storm end up directing itself here at Alaska, the west coast of Alaska, that's a situation that may materialize in some form, hopefully not in the next 7 to 10 days, is by some estimates. But nonetheless, our goal is to get the assessments done as quickly as possible. Unlike other parts of the country, when something like this happens, there's time for the emergency response to unfold. Here in Alaska, traditionally, we're looking out at October for freeze-up in many parts of western Alaska. And so we are going to move as quickly as we can to provide relief, to provide recovery, to provide the essentials that people need. And so we're taking this very seriously. We're going to be in communication pretty much throughout the night, early in the morning as well. We'll have a better assessment as to what's occurred. But just want Alaskans out in the western part of the state and other Alaskans throughout the state to know that we are deeply engaged in this situation with local responders, our federal partners, and other organizations and entities to do everything we can to address this issue as quickly as possible. So with that, I'd like to have Director Brian Fisher come up and say a few words with regard to the emergency response and where things may go from here after we get a more in-depth assessment. Where are you? Right there, Brian.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for your support and leadership. Brian Fisher, the Director of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So I run the State Emergency Management Agency here. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the impacts to the communities that we've seen, so I will step away at times from the microphone to point at the map there just so we have some context about where the storm has impacted the community. The remnants of Typhoon Merbok, as you know, came through the Aleutian Islands. We saw seas as high as 50 feet out there, winds as high as 90-mile-an-hour gusts. The fishing fleet and all the commercial maritime traffic out there had plenty of advance warning and found places of safety to ride out the storm. We didn't really see any impacts or damages at all in the Aleutian Islands or the Pribilofs. As the storm made its way into the southern Bering Sea and up towards the Bering Strait, we did see significant impacts begin as far up the Kuskokwim River as Bethel. There was a little bit of water that came over the dock at the Port of Bethel. Flooding and erosion that occurred just below Bethel in communities like Oscarville and Napakiak. So I'm going to step back for a second and just orient some folks here. So in Bethel and just below Bethel to the mouth of the Kuskokwim River, we've seen erosion, flooding, inundation, as well as some wind damage. The real brunt of the storm so far has hit communities on the west coast of the state. A lot of folks have already seen some pretty good images from Hooper Bay up to the northern part of the handle here through Scammon Bay. The storm right now is north of Diomede in the northern part of the Bering Strait, and we're starting to see the impacts throughout the afternoon in Nome on the western side of Norton Sound. The water and the wind is now making its way to the eastern part of Norton Sound. The communities Golovin, Elam, Koyuk, Unalakleet will all see impacts this evening. Right now, it's not high tide. High tide in the eastern Norton Sound is about 4 a.m. this morning. So we're fortunate that the water levels aren't the highest they would normally be without this storm tonight, but we will continue to see impacts in the Norton Sound communities throughout the rest of the evening and into the morning hours tomorrow. This storm is going to be with us for a while. The impacts are going to be felt above Nome, up to Kotzebue and Kotzebue Sound and communities north in the North Slope Borough, Point Hope, Point Lay, as far as Wainwright and Utqiagvik at the very tip. They won't see damages or wind or waves like the rest of the coast has seen, but they're still going to be impacted by these winds. So we're continuing to communicate all day with the communities out there. Most communities had stood up their emergency operations centers and started notifying their community residents to prepare to take actions a couple of days ago. We've been working with them since then. Most schools have been stood up for shelters. As of tonight, we've heard from the American Red Cross that about 450 residents in those coastal communities have sought shelter in the schools. We haven't evacuated any residents out of their communities to other places at this time. All of that sheltering operation is being handled locally. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Torrance Sachs, the Commissioner of the Military Department and the Adjutant General. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Director. And very good news that there have not been any deaths or reported injuries, but as the Governor said, that could change. Because this is such a wide scope, there likely will be a military response. And just to show where we currently have military assets, we do have some in Bethel, we have some in Kotzebue, and also Nome. Now, Nome in particular, we have 2 helicopters, and we have a large one called the Chinook that can take upwards of 20 people if necessary. Additionally, it does have a hoist. We also have lots of State Defense Force all over the state, so that's a good news story as well. Now, as far as what the Governor said about the declaration, there's 2 fronts on that. One, You can address it to the communities and also to the people. And should we go forward with a federal deck, and I think that hopefully will be approved, again, that will be for the communities and also for the individuals. Because we are quite literally in the midst of a storm, we are asking the question, what do you need? What do you anticipate you're going to need? Now, all the phone calls today, we asked the question, do you have any injuries? As said, none. Do you need medical help? None. But that could change. And we're going to talk in the near future about sewers and if there's any problems with fuel as well. But as the situation evolves, because we are in the midst of it, we want to get the information, we want to be there for the people, and we want to hear what they have to say so we can get out and respond. And with that, I will turn it over to Department of Conservation.
Hi, Jason Bruni, Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. Did want to say, as General Sachs said, we are in the midst of the storm, so there is still a lot of information that is being gathered, but we are going to be closely monitoring and reporting to the Alaska public the drinking water supplies. If there are impacts to drinking water supplies, we will be issuing boil water notices. That will be available on the state of Alaska as well as the DEC social media pages. We will make sure we're communicating with communities and working closely with them. We also know that there are some concerns about sewage lagoons and other wastewater treatment facilities that could have been impacted by the surge. Obviously, more to come on that. And then finally, I think it's very important, our spill prevention and response. We have received one report of a spill from Nome. There was a floating building that hit a 300-gallon tank. The amount of fuel that was in that tank was unknown. That was just reported right around 6 o'clock tonight. Thus far, that is the only spill reported. There was a much larger tank that I think a lot of people have seen on social media, around 50,000 gallons, that did not have anything in it. But we are going to be continuing to monitor and talking with the communities about the potential impacts, and we will be, of course, reporting back to the local communities and having that information on social media and working with the mayors to ensure that information is disseminated. With that, I will turn it back to Commissioner Ryan Anderson with the Department of Transportation. He is on Zoom, and Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Commissioner Bruni. Yeah, appreciate this opportunity that DOT has assets of maintenance personnel across these communities in the western coast of Alaska. And right now, we are getting reports from our personnel on the airports, the roads, bridges, coastal infrastructure. We do anticipate some damages, but the extent of those, of course, are still being assessed. But to share this information with the public, we are setting up some pages. We have a DOT storm response page where the public can get the latest information from DOT on airports, roads, all of those types of assets, as well as, we'll be reporting on social media as well. As the water recedes and the winds die down, we do have a plan. We're planning on bringing additional maintenance personnel from across the state to make sure that, we're taking care with our transportation assets and doing the best that we can once we move into a recovery phase. And this will include DOT operators, mechanics, electricians, all those types of staff. But also, we'll be looking to our contracting community. We've already identified over 10 contracting companies that are in the region. They have assets in the region, and they may be available to help as well as we move into a recovery phase. So we're well on our way to making sure that we are ready to move on from this event and get into the repairs. We've also been talking with the Federal Aviation Administration, and we received some emergency authority to utilize airport equipment off airport. So that again will help us assist communities as we move forward into a recovery phase as more equipment will be available. And we've assembled a DOT response team that's going to work closely with all of the agencies, including the Statewide Emergency Operations Center, to make sure we're on top of things with communication along with our local governments. So we really are prioritizing all the resources we have here at DOT to make sure we're putting the effort into this one, and we're going to hit it with everything we got here. So thank you. With that, I'll send it back over to Governor Dunleavy.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. And Brian, you want to come up and talk about some websites and phone numbers folks can call if they want to report or need help?
Thank you, Governor. So for members of the community that have been impacted by this, we have a couple of ways to contact the State Emergency Operations Center to make sure we can coordinate the response to your needs out there. The best way to contact us and share information and photos, things like that, is at from storm@ready.alaska.gov. That's storm@ready.alaska.gov. The State Emergency Operations Center can always be contacted at 907-428-7100. That's a 24/7 number. But as always, if you have an immediate need in your community, please dial 911 or contact your local village public safety officer, or however that works on Marine VHF, those types of things.
So once again, this is just an update. We've been working on this all day. We've been notified by the Weather Service days in advance. The storm has hit pretty much predicted, and right now we're just asking all Alaskans that are in the path of this storm to seek shelter, take care of your families, take care of your neighbors, and we will continue to work with authorities in your area, in your villages, and we will have an ongoing assessment here tonight, tomorrow morning, and we'll probably have another press conference tomorrow once we gather the assessment and are able to clearly define some of the impacts on many of our communities out west. As mentioned, this storm is predicted to pass over communities such as Shishmaref, start to impact Kotzebue sometime about midnight tonight, and it may go further up the coast. So folks in Kivalina, places like Deering, even Point Hope, just need to be on alert and make sure they've got their personal belongings stored as well as possible, and are seeking, if possible, higher land, higher areas as the storm passes through. But again, we're going to start the recovery process ASAP. That's what we're starting to do now, and we'll be able to give more reports out to the public here, hopefully tomorrow morning or by midday. So. With that said, Jeff, I don't know if we want some folks to take or ask some questions, but we'll do the best we can.
Hughes with the Anchorage Daily News.
I'm not sure, Mr. Fisher, this is a question for you or I think General.
Why don't you guys come over here? What?
I'm mostly just curious what the next phase looks like after the damage stops and what the assessment's going to look like, if that's in a systematic way or based on damage from community or just on access in terms of infrastructure and accessibility.
Yeah, good question. Some of it is going to be on access when it's safe to fly to get into these areas, but as soon as we can fly, we're going to get into it. And the communication has to be constant. As said, every community has been contacted. That has to be continual because things are going to change. When the water recedes, we're going to see what we have and what we don't, what's under the water, then we'll find out. But it is going to be systematic and based on the safety to get into an area. And then every community is going to be different as to what they need. So based on the needs, then we respond.
Thanks, Commissioner. So some specifics there. So over the night tonight and throughout the weekend and early into next week, we'll first be prioritizing looking, if you will, at the bigger picture. Are the roads up and operational? Are the airport lights still operational? And with Commissioner Anderson and his team, making sure that that's available. If there are power plants, water treatment plants that have been severely impacted that affect people's ability to have safe, clean drinking water and those types of things, we're going to be looking at trying to triage those first. So as those needs are developed, we'll send water out to assist as well as work with the partners around the state with Commissioner Bruni and his team and Norton Sound Health Corporation, Yukon-Kuskokwim Health, to look at repairing those facilities that are out there. Following that, we will go out with FEMA and the Red Cross to do on-the-ground damage assessments, both to look at the infrastructure, but really to focus on homes. The homes that were lost, there has been reports of a lot of fishing boats and subsistence equipment that's already been lost or destroyed. So we'll go out and assess all of those impacts to paint a picture for our potential request to the federal government, as well as the governor's declaration allows us to provide assistance to individuals and families and homeowners that have been impacted. So we'll get that picture, and then we will begin the process to have folks apply for that assistance and get money out the door. As that's going on, I just did want to remind the public that's listening to this, in terms of donations, we appreciate everybody's support with offering goods and services to respond to our fellow Alaskans in needs that are out there. Cash is king. The most important thing that you could do right now is provide financial donations or cash donations to reputable charity organizations such as the American Red Cross or the Salvation Army Alaska. At this time, we don't need stuff and things. We will work on that, and when we have specific requests, we will share that with the public to make sure we're all helping our neighbors. But at this point, the most important thing to do would be to support those organizations because they're out there right now and they'll be with us throughout this to take care of Alaskans.
Of how you guys prioritize assessment? Like, is water infrastructure above DOT and road, airport damage is above homes and private residences? Like, how do you guys kind of pick where is the need the most acute?
Sometimes you need to do multiple at once. If you can't necessarily address sewer and water, if your roads are impacted, if your ports are impacted, your airports are impacted. So that's part of the assessments that's ongoing now, and hopefully we'll know more tomorrow. But it's going to be a multi-pronged approach all at once. Because the other issue is, as I mentioned, this is not it's a tropical storm, but it's a tropical storm at the wrong time of the year. Never that it's never that there's a right time of the year, but we got a few weeks left. If everything works according to what in terms of weather and climate, you're gonna start seeing freeze up. So we can't take our time. Nobody can take their time. We can't. The federal government can't. Agencies helping us. We don't have a lot of time, and this has impacted a lot of folks out in Western Alaska when they are doing subsistence fishing and hunting. So all of this stuff needs to be taken into account. So we got to move at a pretty brisk pace, and you'll see multi-pronged approaches on a whole different number of fronts.
As the governor said, it's going to be multi-pronged, but life and limb. Next is food and water, and then infrastructure. And we can all address those all at once, but we want to make sure if someone needs help immediately, we're getting out there.
Call, we'll take our first question from Rhonda McBride at KTOO. Rhonda, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. This storm comes at probably the worst of possible times for many communities in this region. They are on the heels of COVID, a salmon disaster, as well as wildfires. Do you think it might be necessary to call in the legislature to address these needs, a special session?
No, not at this point. We'll have to do the assessment first, Rhonda. But again, this isn't Alaska's first, for lack of a better term, disaster. Alaska is unfortunately a state that deals with disasters all the time. So we've got a pretty competent team set up. And so again, in order to answer that question, we'll have to see what the assessment is tonight and tomorrow. But right now, I think it's premature to talk about having the legislature come back in. We have tools.
That though, is there any thought about extra help being needed because this is coming on the heels of lots of other things when people are more vulnerable than ever?
We believe we have a pretty good response and have had a pretty good response to disasters in Alaska for some time. We're going to assess that, but we believe we have the tools available to us to be able to make that determination as to what resources we need, where, how much, when. So we'll know more tomorrow and be able to give an update on that.
Adrian Peterson at KTVF in Fairbanks. Adrian?
Hello, and thank you. First and foremost, what comes to my mind, recently you did sign Administrative Order 338 for the Office of Food Security, and knowing that, salmon has been highly impacted in that region already, I'd imagine that the wildfires did have a huge impact on hunting in Western Alaska as well. So with food security on the mind, knowing that a lot of these places, I heard earlier from Ed Plum, who is a meteorologist here in Fairbanks, he had gotten word that in one of the communities out there, water had actually flooded over the runway for their airport. And since aerial transportation is a huge part of bringing food out to those communities when subsistence isn't working, I'm curious, where is the state's response on ensuring food security for these people in this disaster?
No, we believe we're prepared to deal with this disaster. We've got helicopters, we've got guard aircraft, we've got military at our bases. We've got the tools to be able to deal with this. It's the assessment that's going to be key. Which villages were impacted, which communities were impacted, to what degree, what was impacted. so we can then prioritize where we need to go with our assets and our resources. Again, we're well aware that this tropical storm that's hit, and potentially one here in a week to 10 days, we hope not, we're gearing up for all of this. We understand it's subsistence. We understand it's hunting and food gathering time of the year. We understand that a lot of our communities were either in the process or just recently received their fuel their fuel for the winter. And so we know all of this. But again, it's the assessment that'll take place tonight, tomorrow, and going into tomorrow evening to determine where we go first. But our plan is to make sure that we take care of all of our Alaskans that are impacted by this tropical storm. As was mentioned by the general, life and limb first, and then your priority issues such as sewer and water, heating, transportation facilities. Our goal is to get things up and running as soon as possible. So we're prepared to do that. We're gearing up for that. We just have to impress upon our federal friends that it's not a Florida situation where we've got months to work on this. We've got several weeks to work on this to get in place the basic needs that people need in Alaska. It's a different place here than it is the rest of the lower 48. So we know we've got the assets. We know what needs to be done. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy or done overnight, but we're planning on making sure that this becomes this is the priority for the administration over the next several weeks until we get folks back to where they need to be.
Okay, our next question is from Mark Thiessen, Associated Press, Alaska. Mark?
Thank you, Jeff. Governor, this might be for you or for the general. When you were talking about a military response, it sounded like we were looking at possibly evacuating people out. Is there any thought given to possibly bringing in or calling up the National Guard to help out these communities since time is so short before freeze up?
Why don't you come over and...
Yes, good question. Bottom line, if the National Guard is needed, we're going to be there. I've already told the staff to be ready for whatever may be needed. As mentioned, we do have helicopters right now in Nome. You can take up to 20 people on our bigger one. It's called a Chinook, but that would likely be for people who need immediate safety evacuation. As far as getting people into the area, we have fixed wing. It depends on the airport. If it's up and running, we can get the bigger aircraft in. If not, we do have the helicopters, but we are looking at whatever may be needed for the entire area.
Anywhere except for J-Bear?
There's a couple with the Coast Guard as well at Kodiak.
In Western Alaska right now?
Not the C-130, but lots of helicopters, and of course we have the C-130s down here at J-Bear if needed. KC-135's up at Eielson, and C-17's here at J-Bear too.
And any of the others under the Guard, are they capable of refueling, or are they all kind of independent?
Some are not, and so depending on the range, that will determine what aircraft we use. The ideal way to get lots of folks in, if the airfield is up and running, we can get the bigger aircraft in there. C-17, C-130.
Next question is from Margie Bauman with the Cordova Times.
Yeah, thank you. Nobody has mentioned post offices. PFDs are starting to come out next week. There are people that are not having direct deposit. They would normally be getting them in the mail. Is the governor's office assessing whether the people in communities impacted will have a post office and will be able to get these checks? Thank you.
Margie, we're assessing everything. We're in the process of assessing everything right now. That assessment will continue into tonight, tomorrow, until the storm passes. And we'll address anything and everything that we need to do to get the communities back up on their feet. With regard to the post office, obviously we'll work to some extent with our federal our federal counterparts. But again, once we get the assessment, and if that is part of the issue that you just mentioned with regard to the PFDs, we'll do what we can to address that as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Sean McGuire at the Anchorage Daily News. Sean?
Thank you very much. Governor, you mentioned some of the preparations that went on before the storm hit. Could you or someone else in the room describe what those were? Because I'm curious. We've seen this big storm across so much of Western Alaska, and I'm just trying to see what was done
Well,
preparations were put in place?
part of what I was referring to, Sean, is that the Weather Service did a pretty good job in predicting this storm. And so, as an individual that lived out in rural Alaska, and I've talked with folks out there, people were preparing in the extent, or to the extent in terms of securing personal belongings, talking to neighbors and friends as to what's going to happen if this hits. Municipal leaders designating whether it's gymnasiums and other places for folks to go to. So those are some of the preparations I was talking about. Brian and the general could talk about the discussions they would have in anticipation of the storm and in terms of gearing up folks, et cetera. But you don't know exactly what it is until the assessments are done. We knew a storm was coming. We didn't know the impacts. We still don't know what the total impacts are until the assessment is done and when the storm passes here tomorrow. At that point, we'll know what needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. What I am saying is that we're prepared for many of these events in Alaska, whether it's wildfires in the summer, whether it's floods in the summer, whether it's earthquakes, blizzards, et cetera. We're kind of the state that has to deal with these issues almost on a regular basis. And so, again, we have a pretty good military here, pretty good National Guard, Coast Guard, and we've got a number of different organizations: Salvation Army, Red Cross, FEMA is going to be helping us as well. So these are some of the things that I think we have in place. It's going to be the assessment. You may have Village A, and then 25 miles away is another village that may not be impacted in the same manner. So those assessments have to be done and have to be reported to us, and that way we can respond accordingly. So those are some of the preparations I was referring to.
Okay, now let's go to Chris Clint with Alaska Public Media. Clint? Clint, did you have a question? Okay, let's go to Anna Rose MacArthur at KYUK in Bethel. Anna Rose?
Hi, thank you. Governor, you said that the storm hit as forecast and that state officials had days of notice before the storm arrived. Residents and communities that I've talked with said that they did not receive emergency notifications prior to the storm, not the cell phone notifications or emergency broadcast. And first, what's your response to those residents? And second, what outreach was done on an individual level by the state? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The preparation that I'm referring to is that the Weather Service had predicted this storm, said it was coming, and said it was going to be a pretty strong storm. And so folks across the state, as a matter of fact, across the world, were reporting on the impending storm. With regard to anticipating how the storm would hit, where it would hit, exactly what communities, that's always difficult when you're dealing with a tropical storm or a storm in the Bering Sea or the Gulf of Alaska, obviously. But the point I was trying to make was we knew this was coming. Most Alaska knew it was coming. Most of the world knew it was happening. It was reported in international outlets. And so we were gearing up to, again, brace ourselves for the impact. We didn't know to what degree. We still don't know to what degree specific villages and communities were impacted. That's what we're assessing now. But again, what I'm trying to say is that we have the resources, the aircraft, the personnel, and if we need more, we'll get more. But once the assessments are done, then we'll have a clear understanding as to what was impacted where. Again, there are going to be some communities that are going to be impacted more than others. There'll be communities potentially close to one another that may have different impacts as a result of the storm. You can't necessarily predict that community A will lose its port, will lose its roads, will lose its water and sewer, its electricity, but you can predict to some degree that may happen. You just don't know when, where, to what degree.
Okay, let's go back to the room for the last question. We'll go to Jeremy with Alaska's News Source. Jeremy?
Hi, doing Jeremy Cashstock here, and we were just wondering, how is the state of Alaska feeling about this storm and the impacts of the storm?
Well, again, it's a major event. It doesn't happen very often, thank God. And again, we're in the process of assessing it. The great news so far is it doesn't appear to have a loss of life attached to it or injuries attached to it. That's great news. We can rebuild, we can replace property, we can get fuel out there quickly, we can get food out there quickly. And so we're prepared to deal with this and make these communities whole and stand up, get back on their feet again. But I think the good news is we did know the storm was coming, and I think people did prepare. But you can't prevent a tropical storm or the remnants of a typhoon. You can't prevent that from happening if it's bearing down on your location. So I would say we'll know more tomorrow, have a better idea what the impacts are. But again, this is priority number one for the state, for this administration. And like the other disasters that we've had to deal with over the last several years, we'll get through this. Hopefully we get through this stronger. And the work has already started. The work's been going on. So anyway, just want to let the folks across Alaska know what's happening. Again, the storm was predicted. As mentioned, outlets all over this country, all over Alaska, have been talking about the impending storm. Again, we've got notice that another typhoon is impacting Japan, and depending upon how that typhoon behaves or the remnants of it, we're going to keep an eye on that as well. But we're going to move very quickly to do everything we can to get our communities assessed, as mentioned several times, today, tonight, tomorrow. We are going to allocate the resources necessary to get our communities back up and running because, again, unlike any other state in the country, we've got several weeks, a few weeks left in western Alaska, northern Alaska before freeze-up happens traditionally. So it's not just dealing with this particular storm, but also the impending freeze-up. We know we got to move quickly. We're going to move quickly. We're going to work with all of our partners. And again, this is where Alaskans pull together. And so I have a lot of faith in our teams. I have a lot of faith in the other outfits that are going to be working with us. And I have a lot of faith in Alaskans. And so we'll give you an update tomorrow to see where things are at. But I want to thank you for tuning in today.